Oh, how I wish. Right now, it's just on life support until I get it wrapped. Not much I can really do other than trust the process and wish it was going a bit faster. Looks like today's not going to be much different. Another long day of work. A single errand complete, and I'm back to the world I know. Or at least the one I'm starting to be familiar with. Sanding. And lots of it. But before I do any more, I think it makes sense to fill all the holes that this car still has. And I don't really know how perfect I need to get it, but what I do know is I can't sand down a low spot. If there's a rock chip, the only way it's actually going to be flat is if it gets filled with something. And now that I have the body glaze, I can finally start doing that. Still, I wonder if this is more effort than it's worth. This car is pretty old, and it's not in the best condition. So if I start down this path, how am I ever going to find a place to stop? This fender is a great example of the pinholes I'm talking about, and the car's covered with them. Tiny little chips in the paint from who knows what, not even as big as a fingernail. So small you might not even see it if you were looking right at it. It's just something you can feel, and that's precisely the issue. Anything we can feel is going to be shown in the wrap. So no matter how I do it, a hole like this left on the paint, if I wrapped over it, would appear as if a rock was stuck underneath. It just wouldn't look good. And sure, the car is absolutely covered in them, but I think it's worth a little bit of time before moving up in the sanding grits to at least try and make them better. The issue with this car was far from perfect. Hasn't been close for decades. This car was a driver, and I think it has been its whole life. That's part of the reason I love it. But it also means that this is the exact kind of step which could take forever. I think I could spend the whole week on this process, every day finding something I missed the days before. If you look for it, you're gonna find it. And the part I'm struggling with is finding a place to call it at good enough. There's only so many hours in the day after all. Has it really been that long already? I feel like everything I've done that's bodywork related just takes twice as long as I expect it to. A simple 20 minutes to fill a couple holes turns into a whole morning gone. Time just bleeds through my fingers, and before I know it, I've got to wait till next week to do anything else. It's a fun process, don't get me wrong, but the way it warps time is surreal to say the least. And it looks like I've got some added pressure too. The wrap should be shipping any day now. So really, the sooner I can get this car finished, the better. At least that was my mindset before I spent time with bodywork. Right now, I almost don't care how long it takes. I just want to be happy with the end result. I think what really gets to me about this process is how repetitive it is. Normally that's not the worst thing in the world, but this almost feels like I'm stuck in some sort of a loop. Every weekend I do this feels exactly like the one before, and like the one that's coming next. Last weekend, I filled some holes and then I wet sanded the car. And this weekend, I get to do the same thing. The same panels, the same motion, all over again. All the while, the car's not gonna look any different. It is making a difference because the car gets smoother every time I do it, but on the flip side of that coin, it's hard to see a light at the end of the tunnel when it all feels the same. The smoother it gets, the more imperfections I notice. The nicer the surface gets overall, the more the small imperfections start to bother me. Relativity's funny like that. I guess today is a little different than last time. Today, the sandpaper gets finer. The plan was to start with a wet sand at 400 grit, and today pick that up immediately with a wet sand at 800 grit, which will be then, once more, followed by a wet sand at 1500 grit. And if I wanted to, I could just keep doing that until it's polished. But for the PPF, wet sand at 1500 grit should be more than enough for a glass finish. It's just getting there, which is the mind-numbing part. Still, I feel like my mindset on it is getting better every single week. This is part of the process, and the more I try to rush it, the worse it's going to end up. So as hard as it is, I really just need to call a spade and do what needs to be done. My mind's been wandering a lot when doing this, but one thing that's been on it consistently is thinking about how I'm actually going to wrap this car. Cars vary pretty tremendously in how difficult they are to wrap, so this whole time I've really been keeping an eye out for areas that might pose an issue in the future, or even just require more attention, like this car's textured rocker panels or the mirror, which takes a lot of time on pretty much any car. The one thing I've got going for me this time is I actually took the time to strip the car beforehand. Speaking of the parts I took off, makes me wonder how much restoration these are actually gonna need. The plastics are faded, the chrome is foggy, and it's not like the paint on the mirror is really any better than the rest of the car. Actually, come to think of it, this is gonna need its own form of prep just like the car did. And if that's true about the mirror, then it's absolutely true about the other parts that I took off the car. Both of the bumpers are in pretty rough condition, and I got so lost working on the car itself that I kind of forgot about them. Maybe I'll have some extra time at the end of the day. Until then, back to the process. And I really must love this thing if I'm trying to polish it this much. Once again, in the blink of an eye, hours passed. Almost in a form of meditation, the day dwindled. 800 grit was complete, and it was now the afternoon. My only question is if I can actually feel a difference now. So I might as well use the plastic bag trick again and see if this made any difference over 400 or nothing at all. It's been a while since I did this, so hopefully I can tell a difference. Well, that's better. I guess with the way the plastic bag amplifies the feeling, dusty surfaces will feel the same as rough ones. But a little bit of water and it feels like glass. Closer. A lot closer. But I think it could still be better. Plus, I already bought the 1500 grit. And if I really push, I might be able to get it done today. Even if the very last thing I quite possibly would ever want to be doing in this exact moment is sanding the same panels with the same process in the same amount of time all over again. Please be worth it. This same process again really just solidifies my feelings on it. I don't like doing it, but I like having done it. Exactly like that old adage about writing. The weird dichotomy of being happy that you did something and accomplished a goal, and the mental struggle of actually doing it and working towards it. Either way, I'd be lying if I was saying I wasn't getting closer. 1500 grit is fine enough that the whole car is starting to have a mirror finish again. And in all honesty, there's a good chance it'll have less orange peel than it came with from the factory. I don't know if this paint has ever been wet sanded before, but it's always had a good amount of orange peel, which is just gonna disappear while doing this. Fun little byproduct, in other words. Well, just like before, the car doesn't really look any better. And this has felt like the day that will never end. Sanding, sanding, sanding. My body hurts, my brain hurts, and the sun is starting to set. But for some odd reason, now I feel more motivated than ever. I can start to see this car wrapped in my head. And before, it seemed so far off that I don't know if I really could. So that's gotta be worth something, right? Too bad I've got to go through this whole slew of emotions one more time for all the parts I took off, but at least these should be a whole lot faster. And so I embark on the same path up the sandpaper grit trail. Orbital sand it flat, and then make it really flat with wet sanding. The same path, the same story, again and again and again. But maybe that repetition and knowing how long it took is part of the reason the result is going to be so worthwhile in the end. Or at least I hope I look back fondly on doing this. Little too late in the evening to think that hard, and too early in the process to tell.
Dude, come on, man, this is perfect.
I guess I should finish what I was doing. Yeah, more sanding. And the bumpers follow the same process, to no surprise. The only difference is when I'm actually wrapping these, what I'm gonna do is take them apart so I can tuck the trim underneath. I was originally planning on doing that today, but once I started to pull them apart, it seemed like they were gonna crack. So I didn't want to rush it because replacing one of these would add a significant amount of time to the timeline. And that's just a whole can of worms that I didn't want to open today. So for now, I'm just gonna prep them like this. And compared to the rest of the car, the front bumper wasn't in the worst condition. Only 1 or 2 spots I had to fill, but the rest was just the same clear coat damage that was everywhere. The rear bumper, on the other hand, had a pretty significant amount of damage to it. That was where the car was hit, and similar to the way the trunk was dented, it had a pretty massive crack. It went all the way through, actually. So what I did is shove a piece of flat metal underneath it, covered in Bondo, to hopefully hold the pieces together. Then I covered the top in more body filler, and now I've got to wait for it to dry. But then, I'm realistically only 1 panel away from having the whole car sanded to 1500 grit. And I'm sure if I look, I'll find more things to fix, more areas to make better. And while that kind of thing used to worry me, I think right now I see that as just part of the process. Something I have to trust, and that I shouldn't skip. I've always been told that the longer you work on something, the more finishing it is going to actually mean to you. And while I won't know if that's true until I actually finish this process, what I do know is if it is true, I guess it's a good sign that today felt like the longest day ever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. That's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.